Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about how to break out of burnout in 5 simple steps, a roadmap for women in healthcare. We are just going to get rolling because there is a ton to cover. So first, we'll just think about who this is for. Really, this session is for any women in healthcare who are exhausted and feel like they've lost their sense of purpose, or anyone who constantly feels like they're failing at home. There's a lot of different ways to conceptualize burnout, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through the session. But I think that if you feel overwhelmed and exhausted and just completely at the end of your rope with anything to do with your job in healthcare, then this session is for you. So the objective of today's talk, by the end of this session, I want you to be able to realize that prioritizing yourself is the only way to survive in today's healthcare system, to develop a comprehensive strategy for working in stressful environments without losing yourself, to be able to differentiate burnout from the day-to-day stress and recognize the serious health consequences of untreated burnout. We're going to reflect on our common shared experiences in healthcare and what about the healthcare environment drives burnout, so that we can recognize and modify. And then we're going to appraise our own current situation and determine your next action step on your path to creating a life you love. So by the end of this 45 minutes, you're not only going to have some new knowledge, but you're going to actually be armed with the next best step for you to take towards a better situation. So with that, I feel confident that I can promise you that if you make these shifts, you'll reclaim energy and excitement you had when first starting your career. All of that wide-eyed optimism that we had when we were in our first or second year of our training program, and all the excitement that we had about this profession that we have chosen. And furthermore, I'm going to go even further and say that if you apply all of these shifts to your life consistently, you're going to up-level into a woman that is fearless, formidable, uncompromising, and bold, living life on your own terms, undaunted by anyone else's conception of how you should behave. So you are going to be a real badass. So before we get into all of that, let's just take a minute just to make sure we're all on the same page with what we're talking about when we talk about burnout. Burnout, as defined by the WHO and other people who do a lot of research in this area, is this sort of triad of emotional exhaustion, lack of meaning in work, and cynicism or depersonalization. So that looks like when we talk about emotional exhaustion, that's, your soul is tired. This isn't just physically tired that can get better when you take a nap or sleep in on the weekends. This is your soul is depleted and you just feel overwhelmed and exhausted at all times. The cynicism and depersonalization can show up as things like feeling angry towards your patients, or maybe being detached from the purposes of your work. Maybe you could feel something like, most days I just don't even see the point. Or that you really just can't connect with, the meaningfulness of the work, which is what drew most of us here to begin with. And then the lack of personal efficacy or lack of meaning in work is that, you don't feel confident in your ability to do your job. You just keep working harder and harder, but you seem to accomplish less. And your productivity actually just keeps getting worse because your brain doesn't work because of all this other stuff going on, which then further harms your self-confidence. So unfortunately, all of these things kind of reinforce and amplify each other until you just, kind of get down and down and down. And some of you may be in a very severe state of burnout where you may be very close to being non-functional at all. I do want to differentiate burnout from stress. They're related, but different. Stress is a temporary condition. We have stressful conditions, and we, in the healthcare environment, certainly encounter those every single day. But that's temporary. You get stressed and then you're able to reset back to your baseline. When you are stressed, you may feel anxious, you may feel overstimulated, your nervous system is revved up, kind of high heart rate, kind of that fight or flight response when you're in stress. And you may experience that primarily with physical symptoms. So you may feel some tightness in your muscles, you may feel some sort of, queasiness or tightness in your belly, But again, once that stressful stimulus passes, you kind of can reset to baseline, which is different from burnout, which is really this syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress. So when all that stress is not relieved and it becomes chronic and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up, it's not been successfully managed. This actually looks like a lack of engagement and more emotional symptoms. So that when we were talking about that kind of soul tired, soul exhaustion, which can actually, be more of low mood, disengagement, that cynicism, is how the burnout syndrome shows up. The other piece that I want to sort of talk about that sometimes gets sneaky is this idea kind of a false recovery. So sometimes many of us who are high performing, high drive kind of people are always going at 100 miles an hour. And that when we try to recognize, okay, I need to take a little bit better care of myself, let me back off. Maybe you drop down to a shorter work week, or maybe you let go of one of your committee meetings, or maybe you outsource something at home, like order a meal delivery service. And you feel like, oh my goodness, okay, that's going to really help a lot. And you do feel a little bit better, but really in reality, you've only dropped from going 100 miles per hour down to 85. You feel better because relatively it's an improvement, but you're really still overdoing it and still at risk for all of those chronic effects. If we were to consider that 65 is the speed limit, and if we need to recover, we maybe even need to go much lower than that, or even pull off to the side of the road in order to be able to recover, that when we're kind of living in this 85 to 100 lifestyle, we're really not making any progress toward recovering from our burnout. And lastly, before we get into the solutions, I just want to think about, what does burnout cost us? What is really at stake when we think about living in this burned out state? Certainly poor health and poor quality of life, things like headache, digestive issues, sleep issues, immunity, and even things like insulin resistance and hypertension are documented responses to chronic stress, which can then lead to organ damage and all kinds of downstream health effects. Our relationships can definitely suffer because when we're feeling that emotional exhaustion and cynicism, those feelings of failure and self-doubt really invade every aspect of our lives. So that can be relationships with our partners, relationships with our kids, parents, friends, whoever it is. This can be very pervasive. Unfortunately, we as humans utilize isolation as a coping mechanism. So sometimes when we're feeling stressed, we withdraw, which can further harm relationships. And then that reactivity, from kind of having that short fuse, certainly may lead us to take our emotions out on others, which is not good for our relationships. And lastly, I think we really know that burnout can drive people to many negative coping behaviors, such as numbing with alcohol, food, or drugs, maybe doing retail therapy, which can be very costly, and just end up with a bunch of stuff that you don't need, or trying to plan and take expensive vacations because you think that will make you better. So I think when you can take a step back and look at it, that not dealing with your burnout may actually be costing you a lot, both in terms of your finances as well as your health and your relationships. There's also some really interesting data that I came across recently that happiness was correlated with higher salary. So not the other way around, not when you succeed and get higher salary, you get happy, but that if you could stay in a positive affect more of the time, that would actually lead to higher salary, promotions, and better job opportunities. So I think that that's another way that living in a burned out state may actually be costing you quite a bit at this point, is that you may be missing out on advancement opportunities because people may say, oh, she's already overburdened and overwhelmed. We can't possibly put anything else on her. And that may be true that you already have too many things, but that may be the thing that was perfect for you, and you would have really enjoyed that opportunity. So the big question that I had to face when I was going through burnout. And the one that I think a lot of the people I work with, we have to face is, are we really terrified that things will just never get better and will just continue to feel worse and worse and worse? And that will mean that we lose our career or our relationships or our health, as we just talked about on the last slide. I felt every day like I was living in a deep, dark cave, and that I worried that I couldn't get out, and that made me worry that I was really going to ruin everything in my life that I had, which then, of course, just further drove me deeper into the hole. So that's all terrible, right? The burnout is bad, right? I think we all can agree burnout is bad, and we want to try to get better. And so the good news is that while that does exist and that is a very real problem, that getting out of it only takes these 5 simple shifts. So let's think about a little bit what the good side of things looks like. If you make these 5 shifts, how are you going to feel? You are going to have tons of energy, going to wake up every day excited to get going. You're going to be connected and feel really connected to your purpose, easily able to see the positive impacts that you have on your patients as well as your loved ones. And you'll feel motivated to do even more and to serve at a higher level. So this is the opposite of the way that we feel when we're burned out, when we're like, I can't possibly do one more thing. You're going to actually flip that around. You'll have confidence that you can handle things, right? So you'll kind of have that internal certainty. There's so much uncertainty in the world. There's so many things that we can't control. But once you make these shifts, you're going to really be able to feel grounded and confident in yourself and your ability to navigate. You'll be able to enter any meeting, whether that's a patient encounter or a team meeting or a board meeting, knowing that you're bringing your best self, and you're going to come up with the most insightful reflections and the best solutions, and everybody's going to just think you're absolutely brilliant. At home, your spouse is going to notice that you have your spark back, and you'll begin communicating better and having fun together, and your relationship will improve. And even your kids are going to notice. You may notice that they're going to be calmer and more engaged because you are showing up for them in a way that really allows them to achieve their full potential, because they see that mom is her highest and best self. So these are all really exciting things that I've seen in myself, and I've seen them in my clients. So let's get going. Just a minute to tell you who I am and how I came up with some of this stuff. I am still a full-time practicing physician. I do some of this coaching and burnout work kind of in coordination with my hospice practice. I have 2 teenage girls, so that kind of keeps me busy. And I did go through burnout at several points in my career, actually, most recently about 6 years ago, when I was really considering leaving the field of medicine altogether. I've been working in the Harvard teaching hospitals, so I've been in lots of different care settings and worked with people in different disciplines and different specialties. And over the years, gotten a good understanding of the things that drive burnout and the things that will actually help people feel better, as well as the perspective I've gained from working with people in my hospice practice, people who are coming to the end of their lives, and all of the perspective they're sharing about what's really important and how to live a life that you're happy about, so that when that time comes, you don't have any regrets. So how did I discover these 5 shifts? What is this 5 shifts stuff? So this is all the stuff that I wish I knew 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as I was going through these various points in my life. I would have loved to have somebody package this up for me. A lot of this I figured out by trial and error. I read a lot of books and did a lot of seeking of wisdom from a wide range of sources, looking at the business world, looking at spiritual teachings, looking at neuroscience, literature, field of positive psychology. And one thing that I was noticing is that there were a lot of sort of similar themes, and a lot of the same answers were coming up from various resources. So that was a good sign that it was probably accurate, or good stuff to think about. And so a lot of this comes from the confluence of kind of all of those different sources and all the research and learning that I've done over the years. And I've packaged this as kind of 5 shifts because I do think more than doing a specific skill or more than kind of practicing a specific behavior, that a mindset shift that really changes your perspective on something is what's going to really allow you to make those sweeping changes that you need to make in order to thrive in a healthcare environment. It is a very stressful environment. That's always going to be true. But I believe firmly that that it is capable of working in that stressful environment without burning out if you have proper mindset practices in place. All right, so here we go. Shift number one is put yourself first. So this can be a really big one. It's very simple, but it can be very big for a lot of people. We are all in helping professions who have kind of been trained up in the mentality of putting others first and serving others as our kind of primary purpose. So this is why I say the shift has to be that you are going to put yourself first. So what do I mean by this? I do not mean self-care. Now, I think in a lot of healthcare environments, wellness offices and HR departments are really offering self-care as the answer. I do not think so. Taking a bubble bath or having a fancy coffee are lovely, but they're really not going to fix your burnout. What you really need is a comprehensive strategy. And the strategy does have to put you at the center. So I stick to my assertion that when you need to put yourself first, but not in the way that I think many other people say that, or in the way that these wellness offices may be rolling it out at your hospitals or organizations. You need to be your number one priority every day. And why is that? Well, similar to what we hear on the airplane, put your own oxygen mask on first. You need to be alive and thriving and strong in order to be able to help and serve others. That doesn't mean you need to be doing fun leisure activities all the time, but it does mean you need to be well. So physically taking care of yourself, taking care of your mental health, and recognizing that you are your first priority is really critical. The answer is not self-care, but self-compassion. So this is, again, a little bit of a shift. Put yourself first as the primary shift by practicing self-compassion. So kind of like the sub-shift, if you will. Self-compassion is a practice and a lifestyle, if you will, of mindfulness. So kind of noticing what's going on, recognizing common humanity. I am not the only person that this is happening to. Other people are also experiencing X, whatever it is, and then offering yourself self-love. You deserve love. You deserve to be cared for. So that's the sort of, in a nutshell, practice of self-compassion. There's certainly a lot more that we could get into well beyond the scope of this talk about what it means to live in a state of self-compassion. But for the purposes of this talk, where we're trying to kind of get the key shifts, just know that moving towards self-compassion is going to be really important, because in the helping professions, we of course want to be able to offer compassion to others, and that our ability to offer compassion to others is going to be capped or have like a ceiling on it by how well we are able to offer compassion to ourselves. So whether you believe me or not that taking care of yourself is important, if you believe this, then you will know that I can't be serving other people and be compassionate to other people beyond how compassionate I can be to myself. And I want to be amazingly compassionate to other people. So I need to be amazingly compassionate to myself. Just as a little example, this is one of my clients. She was a nurse. She is a nurse. One of those people that just like a dynamo, like kind of very energetic, doing all the things, picking up the extra shifts, doing the bake sales, gets in early, stays late. There's always too much work to do, and she's going to do her darndest to help everybody out. And she just, over years of working in her career, had developed burnout, of course, and really a story that she couldn't take her foot off the gas pedal. If she wasn't there to pick up those extra shifts and do things for the kids and do things for the family members and join the committees and fill in all the gaps, that everything was going to fall apart. And she just didn't want that. So we really had to explore kind of why she was resistant to valuing herself. And she eventually was able to recognize that her belief that she could give and give and give and give and give without refilling herself was flawed. And that she had been really wearing herself out, burning her candle at both ends, because she had this core belief that the only way she was valuable was through serving others. So we actually had to, get her to find value in other aspects of herself, so that she could release some of that. She also believed that because she was a nurse, she was kind of made of something tougher and didn't have basic human needs like food, water, and sleep, for example. And a lot of us kind of have that mentality. We do. So the toughness and the grit and the fortitude had kind of become a badge of honor. And it was really hard for her to see that that was something that may actually be having negative impacts on her. But over time, we were able to get her to recognize that she wasn't really serving people very highly by kind of just running and running and running, that she was really not sharing the best version of herself when she was doing that. And so giving herself permission to rest, relax, recharge, and really get herself back to her full potential was actually a better way to serve people. So after we kind of did all that work together, she, within a few weeks, was able to sleep 8 hours at night and actually take a lunch break. And she's noticed that she's able to trim down her to-do list a little bit more and get a lot more balance in her life by recognizing that the pushing and pushing and pushing actually doesn't accomplish anything. She said to me, "This is amazing. Since we cut back on my to-do list, I actually feel like I accomplished more because I was spending a lot of time trying to remember and trying to sort of fight against this foggy brain that comes from the constant running." Allowing her mind to settle and allowing her to focus on the high priority things, she actually felt a lot more productive. So that's a success story around shift number one. Let's move on to shift number two, which is another biggie that is hard for us women in healthcare, and that is to say no and set boundaries. You really, the shift here is that you have to take responsibility for protecting your energy, and that no one's going to do that for you. Other people, just by their nature, are going to kind of take and take and take and take and take, even if they have your best interests at heart. That is kind of hardwired into humans. So we need to put some boundaries in place. Most of us are conditioned to say yes because we want other people to like us and we want to make people happy and we see our role as helpful people. So of course, we're going to say, yes, we'll help you. But the system will bleed you dry. No one's coming to save you, so you need to set your own boundaries. There are three types of boundaries that I typically talk about. Again, lots more to unpack here, but just as an overview, there are physical boundaries. So those are the kind of logistics things. How much do you work? How many patients can you see? How many hours can you do it in? There are emotional boundaries, which are incredibly important, and I think something that most people could use work on. And those are the ones that allow you to have a healthy amount of detachment from your patient. So their suffering cannot become your suffering. There is too much suffering. You cannot take it on. It will take you down. So having emotional boundaries is incredibly important. And then also having psychological boundaries so that you know whose opinions matter, so that every person who doesn't like something you said or doesn't like something you did or doesn't like the color of your hair or the sweater you chose to wear that day or whatever is not coming in and affecting you. We kind of put a boundary about what information comes through. Within the emotional boundary piece, we also have to sort of temper our empathic presence. And this one's really hard for healthcare. And what I end up talking with clients a lot about is, empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. So if you are feeling other people's feelings for them and being with their suffering without putting any boundaries in place, you are just going to suffer yourself needlessly and actually not be able to help them at all. Like if you were down in the hole with them, you're not really able to help them. So kind of having measured empathy, the right amount of empathy with proper boundaries in place, and really getting to a place of compassion where you can meet they're suffering with love and not by taking on their suffering, that's the place that's sort of the goal of all of this. Thinking about physical boundaries is often the most lovely place to start, which is where I started with my client, CJ. She was a nurse practitioner in a large hospitalist group. They were having staffing issues and lots of requests for extra help. And she was really struggling because she felt burned out already, but wanted to be a good teammate. So we were able to put some boundaries in place. We identified there were some values that aligned with picking up extra shifts, that extra money would help her with paying her college bills, and that helped her to feel like she was being a good parent. But that if she worked more than one night shift per week, she was having detrimental health effects. So she was able to kind of construct a system and put some of those kind of physical, logistical boundaries in place so that she could say, I'm helping as much as I can while preserving my well-being. There's a little bit of a psychological boundary built in here too, right? Because she's already starting to think about whose opinions matter, and that if this story that she's doing her part is true and she internalizes that, then whoever may complain that she's not picking up enough or whatever it is, she knows that that's not true and she doesn't need to take that on. So there's a little bit of a psychological boundary kind of built in here. Having a few key people who in your life who understand your value system and can hold you accountable is kind of the key to the balance of like having good boundaries and also knowing that you have some checks and balances, like, am I actually doing the right thing? But we don't want to live our life by public opinion poll. Not everybody's opinion matters. Having a few key people that may be trusted friend, spouse, or a coach who can help you make sure that your actions are in alignment with your values can be incredibly helpful. All right, shift number 3, real secret sauce. So moving from being reactive to everything to having intentional responsiveness or getting back in the driver's seat of your own life. This is so impactful because where your attention goes is where your energy flows. So if you're just at the whim of everything that's happening around you and you're just kind of like the effect and you're reacting to everything, that your attention is going to get really diluted. And of course, you're going to feel exhausted and overwhelmed. So that's why I say that this is really the secret to never feeling overwhelmed again, because if you can have agency over your attention and tune it into the things you value most, then you're really going to stay in the driver's seat and make sure that you're the cause, not an effect. Modern life can get us into very reactive states, and there's always sort of stimuli coming our way, and that we have an automatic reaction based on our past experiences, our habits, our attitudes. And this can occasionally get us into trouble, like saying something without thinking. But really, the real problem, why I call it the secret sauce, is that it saps your attention big time. When we're reacting to everything all the time, we're constantly burning energy. What's worse is that we've gotten so used to this that we don't even think we can break out of it. We're just constantly feeling reactive. But I'm here to tell you that you can become responsive, not reactive, or another way that you can become the cause and not the effect. So the old way, and what a lot of our hospital wellness offices and things would like us to believe, is that if we do self-cares, that we can get better. So the old way of doing pizza parties or changing jobs or taking a wellness seminar or doing some productivity hack or just catching up on your sleep on the weekends or taking an expensive vacation, taking a happy hour, doing your meal planning or using a productivity hack can help you. These are just more energy drains. These are just wastes of your time because it's just more stuff for you to do that doesn't really take you where you need to go. These Band-Aid fixes are just some version of energy leaks and numbing. So they might make you feel a little bit better temporarily, but none of them are really getting to the real problem. And I know that many of you who have heard all this stuff, you can feel insulted even that this is what's being sold as the solution to your problems. But if you can make this shift where you see yourself as the cause and not the effect, you begin to identify what you truly need. And then you're better able to identify solutions that can actually help you improve your situation instead of doing all this BS that doesn't actually help. So how do we do that? How do we move from being a cause to being an effect? How do we move from being reactive to being intelligently responsive? the goal that we need to do is to widen this space between the stimulus and response. So we are constantly barraged by stimuli. Um, and we want to be able to create a little space so that we can actually choose the response instead of reacting out of those old patterns and all of those old habits. We can actually choose our response. There is several ways that you can cultivate this, and that's beyond the scope of this talk. But the things that I want you to focus on today are building your internal resources. When you're in a well-resourced state, you're much able to be able to choose the best response than when you're in a low resource state. I mean, think about it. When are you going to make the better decision? When you're well rested, fed, and hydrated, or when you're sleep deprived, hungry, and dehydrated? Your physical container is the vehicle that allows you to do everything that you do. So I would definitely start there by focusing on your sleep, your nutrition, your movement, drinking water, limiting alcohol and drugs, and of course, practicing your self-compassion like we talked about in shift number 1. And then when you're able to do that, you're going to bolster up your response ability, your ability to be responsive, which will then allow you to identify all of those good changes that you want to make and be an advocate for change. You're no longer going to see yourself as a victim of the system. You're going to see that you're an actor within it with potential to modify it. Now, I say that, and I truly believe it. I also know that within most health systems, there's a big power differential. So the systematic factors have a lot more power than any individual person, even if they're the most well-resourced and the most response-able person that we could imagine. There's still only one person, but one person becomes another person, becomes another person, becomes another person. And so I do really think that there's potential for change, although some of the time your response will be that you are in a truly toxic situation and that the best course of action is to leave. And so I don't want anybody to hear that I'm putting the burden of change solely on your shoulders, only to give you hope that through choosing your best response, you can actually affect change to improve your situation. Shift number 4 is to leverage joy. So this is kind of the glue that holds us all together. When we think about joy, we think about an emotion that's invoked by well-being, success, or good fortune, or by the prospect of getting what you want. We all deserve to have joy in our lives and in our work. And just because we've chosen to work in medicine does not mean that we need to suffer. So I'm giving you permission to have joy. And I'm also giving you permission to shift your thinking that joy does not just exist outside of work. We should be able to be joyful throughout our day and infuse all of the prior stages all the prior steps that we've done with joy to make them even more powerful. I mean, I certainly would prefer my clinicians and the people who take care of me when I go to get care to be joyful. I would much prefer that versus them be cranky or sullen. It doesn't mean that you need to change your personality and be a cheerleader. I mean, there can certainly be quiet joy, but most of us repress, any aspect of joy in the name of being professional. I think patients also experience joy and appreciate permission to have joy, even though they're in tough circumstances. So again, this is another example of how doing something that helps you will also help your patients and the people that you serve. When we think about flow in work, and so how do we experience joy in our work, that is most often when we're in this flow state. So flow is kind of thought of as a balance, kind of like being in the zone. It's a balance between anxiety and boredom, and that identifying activities or aspects of your job in which you feel in the flow and looking for ways to do more of that and less of the stuff that either has you in the anxiety zone or in the boredom zone is the way to increase the amount of joy that you'll have throughout your day. Just as an example, we'll think about Dr. B. She's a pediatrician. She's fantastic at her job, but was just done. I mean, she was just so beat down by and demoralized by all the world events that even though she really loved children and was very connected to her mission, that all of the violence in the world and world events over the past couple of years kind of had her feeling like, what's even the point? Nothing I do even matters. So doing some work, focusing on her joy, focusing on things that kept her in the flow, she was really able to anchor to a couple of key things and really thinking about this idea of like, how do I help kids grow up into healthy adults? We started a journal where she could kind of chronicle, people I helped today, and was able to really identify that by keeping kids up with their vaccines, she was promoting health not only of her patients, but of her community, and that by supporting parents when they came in, worried well, they came in with a well kid, but we're really worried about them and helping them through that. Those were things that she could really kind of clearly draw a line to her mission of helping kids grow up healthy and turn into thriving adults. So by reconnecting to her joy and focusing in, anchoring to her joy throughout the day, she really found some renewed energy to not only continue her practice, but also start some advocacy efforts to kind of help her feel like she was actually doing something to improve those social justice issues that were weighing her down. Um, and now she has another little journal that every time she sees an injustice in her day-to-day life, she can focus on how she helped. And then she can also put that on an advocacy ideas list so that when she goes to her community groups, she knows she's having an impact. All right, so what have we covered so far and how is this going to help us? Really, the culmination of all four of these shifts is that we want to step into our own story. So how are you going to step into your story? You're going to put yourself first and offer yourself compassion in all your messy glory. You're going to set some healthy boundaries to protect your time and energy. You're going to become a cause, not an effect, and get yourself back in the driver's seat of your life. And you're going to give yourself permission to experience joy every single day. And that is how you're going to live at the center of your story. That is a story and a life that makes you excited to be living it. But making all these shifts can be challenging. This is really stuff that's not easy for high achieving, high performing helper service type people, which brings me to shift number 5, which is that you need to invest in mentoring. Everyone deserves to have a mentor, somebody that can help them achieve their goals. Mentors can offer new ideas and accountability, and help provide support when, it kind of feels like you're going against the grain. You might have those moments of self-doubt. And so having somebody who can continue to bolster you up will be invaluable. Coaching has become really commonplace in the business world and has been proven to help people in those arenas to accelerate their success. It's been a little slower to be adopted in medicine and healthcare environment. But I think that it can really be innovative and give you an edge and an advantage to invest in coaching. And the fact that you're committing your time and resources to improving yourself will catalyze your success. So when you work with a coach, I kind of think of as somebody who can hold your dream and hold you to the actions that you need to achieve it. In this case, for what we're talking about today, your dream is to overcome burnout and get into a state of thriving in all areas of your life, while still continuing to do the hard work of healthcare. It is such hard work, but everyone who's chosen it sees it as a calling or a mission. And that if you left it behind, you would probably always feel like a little piece of you was missing. So your dream in this case is to have a system that allows you to go into that every day and come out again intact. So we're going to hold that little seed of your dream with you, and help you grow it and help you figure out all of the things that you need to do to achieve that. The other thing that we know is that women in healthcare fields, high achieving women are kind of prone to overdoing in other aspects of life as well. It's not just when you're at work. So having somebody that can kind of hold that mirror up to help you see all the things that you are doing, in your other aspects of your life as a wife, as a mother, as a community member, daughter, and any of the other roles that you're doing, having somebody who can help you show you what an amazing person you are, and finding a way to ensure that you're continuing to be your highest and best self. Okay, so here are your steps to success. You are going to practice self-compassion, going to develop healthy boundaries. You're going to be a cause, not an effect. You're going to experience joy every day, and you're going to invest in coaching. Now you've got the roadmap. Now you have a choice. Which path are you going to choose? So I hope that today has been beneficial for you. You have everything that you need to succeed. I know that you've heard a lot about burnout. I know that it's a hot topic and it can be hard to believe that it can get better. The system is really broken. You're not wrong about that. But I also know that individual improvements and small changes can make a big impact. I do this work because the world needs the best and the brightest. And I want the best and the brightest taking care of me and my family when we need healthcare. So I look forward to talking to people soon. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you guys.